Hi, Potil family, and welcome back to another episode of Potil. I know we've been gone forever, so Happy New Year, Happy Valentine's, Happy Easter, and whatever happened in between. Happy Madaraka, all that jazz, Pauline and I have been gone for long, but we can start our new year in June. Amani Andre, we can always start. So, welcome back to another episode of Justice Obscured, a series that I started to be able to explore our judicial system. And before we start today, I have a guest. Hi, friends.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Can you please tell the guests, our audience, actually, who you are?
Okay. So my name is Braxton Were. I just finished my 4 years in undergrad law school, and so I'm about to transition to KSL. But in the moment, I'm just hanging.
Yeah. Period. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tunangoja graduation yako, tukule, to dance,
Mchele lazima.
and everything in between.
Yeah.
So before we start our episode and really dive into what we want to talk about, because I'm so excited about this episode. Yeah, you guys don't know, Braxton is my really good friend. This episode actually has been birthed from the numerous conversations me and Braxton have had for the past 4 years of her being in school. I've lived vicariously through Braxton through law school.
For sure.
Yeah, so that's this episode is long overdue, but I felt like now is the perfect time to talk about it. But before we start, I want to introduce a new segment where we have an icebreaker. And in this icebreaker, we talk about either what we've read this week or this month, what we saw online, or what caught our attention that we'd like to share with the group.
Okay.
So, Basto, maybe you should go first and tell us, maybe from whatever, whether it is you're reading or what has caught your attention this month.
Okay. So, it's actually quite a lot. There's a lot, but I'll talk about two for this section. I mean, this session. Yeah. So one of them is a book I've been reading, 1,000 Splendid Suns. It's a common book. I believe every girl have read it. Yeah. And so what caught my attention in that, or rather, the book really made me appreciate the Kenyan Constitution in terms of how progressive it is, and it had me comparing, Islam countries, and we all know that they are, or rather, their primary law is the Sharia laws, which influence their constitution and basically all their laws, right? And then there are countries like this, and when you look at their countries, they tend to be so oppressed, especially when you look at, women rights and children. I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah, and basic freedoms too.
Yeah, so reading that book really made me appreciate the Kenyan Constitution. Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about that in a later conversation.
Shuttle.
Yeah.
Subtle foreshadowing. Ingereza, come back quickly. What is this?
Oh yeah, and another thing is a recent decision by one of the judges in the High Court of Kenya, and this decision was on the unconstitutionality of criminalizing of consensual sexual relationships between minors. And basically what this is that ukipata two minors were in a relationship and they engaged in sex and whatever,
wali do the dark,
tabia mbaya,
they love each other.
Yeah. And so in the past ungepata boychild alikuwa anaumia, boychild anaenda ndani, wataki kujua kama both of them are minors because and so there was that bias
that legally the boychild would carry
will carry your consequences. You're still being accused of like defiling the girl, yet but you are both minors.
I just arrived.
Exactly. And so this decision really overturned that norm that was there, and of course it has been met by a lot of controversy because watu hawataki, and now I can just see the problem with society. Because mbona mnataka boychild alale ndani
na girl child
if you love me
watch your video. If you love me, just give me a kiss. Watch your videos. Insert the video here, Dennis.
And so most of the time unapata hata in court dema anasema this is my boyfriend,
this is my boyfriend, my man.
Na bado mnaweka kijana ndani, and so
sasa nakuja visiting in prison.
Exactly,
because mmefunga the love of my life.
Hata wakujangi mama atakubali.
We move on to the next nigga. Amesema prison. Inmate. No thanks.
And so boychild amekuwa akiumia. And so this decision was very eye-opening and interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think on my side, I've been reading an article called, I've been reading it because it's long, but it's also very reflective. It was posted on Times of India, and it was an article about the grief of adult friendships.
Okay.
And it was talking about how that a major ingredient in friendships, especially for adults, is proximity. That your friend could be your ride or die. You know that person you can depend on.
Yeah.
But if that person moves and you're no longer in close proximity, the friendship slowly gets stressed, and there's a problem that will happen eventually. Like the distance always puts a strain on friendships. And this is so real for me and Blackstone right now, because Blackstone is going to KSL. The way we've been fantasizing about how I'm moving to Nairobi because I'm not staying by myself. Dakana nani? Oh, hijab like me and Blackstone. If you haven't shared, me and Blackstone go to the same church. We're both Christians. And when we get to church and we don't see each other, tunakanga kama yatima. Because I will look for Braxton everywhere. Baka tunaambiananga, we need to get other friends.
Mbona hukuniambia ukuji?
Mbona hukuniambia ukuji?
Betrayal in the
Judas!
city. Yeah.
Judas, is that you?
I know.
And that's the kind of friendship we have. And I think that sat with me very strongly, because it doesn't mean your friend is fake. Proximity is one of the major ingredients for a successful adult friendship, because I'm busy. If I can't see you at least once a week in an environment where I'm like I have to be there, or I usually am there, it makes it really hard. And I really applaud people who have like actually best yangu ako abroad
and just still
actually my best friend is we video call every day.
Yeah.
You are the strongest soldier amongst us, because I can't do it. Anyway, so with that being said, let's dive into this segment.
All right.
So I think we'll start with establishing why you joined law school. 4 years ago, will you decide I want to be a lawyer? What made you want to be a lawyer?
Okay. So of course one of the major reasons is mimi kama my fellow lawyers nilianguka math vibaya sana. KCSE nilikuwa
unasema all lawyers madongo hesabu. Mshaambiwa.
See what but majority of us let me speak for myself. Mimi nilipata D+ yangu moja safi,
clean,
and I went home.
Yeah.
You know,
you said I'm not going hard.
Everything else was okay, but hapo kwa math. And so whenever I would look like at all the other courses, zote walikuwa nasema math. Najiambia siwezi patana na calculus tena.
Please, differentiation and integration. I'm integrating you now. Never again in my life.
Yeah, integers.
Nah.
Thank you. And another reason is one of the people I've really looked up to growing up is my mother. And my mother is a lawyer. Yeah. And so to me,
I feel like we still look up to your mother.
Right?
Your mother is a superwoman.
I know, you must have 48 hours in your
day. Time mali.
I know. And then the way she's just so bold, and then getting to experience or rather listen to, her every day from work, talking about what she's managed to like achieve in work that day, or even the failures, right? And whenever she will share like say something that didn't go as she anticipated, it made me really think about, or rather start having these questions about our justice system at a very young age. And in her joys and successes, I was like, wow, I really want to be part of. I really want to be part of transforming society. Yeah. And this is how I ended up in law school.
Period.
Yeah. And I'm a yapper.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your honor? Mama. Your honor. I'm just a girl.
Yeah.
The memes are usually hilarious. Has that reason evolved over time? Of course, something like seeing your mom be a superwoman would not hold you sanye exam iko.
Tell me about it.
You are studying thousands and thousands of cases and reading the Constitution. Like I've seen Blackstone read the Constitution so much, mpaka nachoka. Naonanga vitabu za Blackstone natoshana hivi. Nasema guy, ni ngumu. So has that reason developed, or has it gotten like a stronger anchoring over time?
Well, I think it has been a bittersweet journey. And of course you have high moments, but of course in law school, sometimes the low moments are quite a lot. And I think for me, one of the things I grappled with is the fact that sometimes in our world, justice won't always be achieved. And even when justice is achieved through the lenses of law, then and of course the law teaches you how to be a thinker and really evaluate situations beyond just what is presented to you. And sometimes when you really sit and look at it, you're just like, justice squarely, because again, with our law, sometimes it's punishment, or but of course most of the time we lean towards punishment, right? And sometimes we just sit and wonder whether we're actually doing anything as a society, because you would think that by the evolving of laws, maybe crime will reduce, injustices would disappear, but is that the case? I know.
And that's the whole point of this series, because
Yeah.
I remember the first episode I put out, I said, is justice an illusion?
Yeah.
Is it like a smoking mirrors? Because we hear of justice, we hear of judicial systems, but is it truly just when somebody murders my daughter and then they just get wanafungiwa tu in prison?
Yeah.
My daughter is gone forever.
Yeah, for
you know
sure.
that it doesn't change anything. So there's that part of me that really grappled with the idea of justice.
Yeah, so like I said, I also grappled with that a lot. Kwanza, being a Christian, I went through so many, or rather down through so many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Why am I even a lawyer in the first place if justice might just be an illusion? And on top of that, what grounds do I have for actually judging people? And I asked myself that so many times. That mornings I would just wake up and I'm like, I'm quitting this. Of course, because
I've been there for those seasons.
But with time, I actually realized how without the law, society would for real crumble.
Yeah.
Because as much as justice may never really be fully achieved, especially when you're a Christian, you know how perfect justice looks like, right? Or rather, we've been painted the picture of how the world would have been if all these injustices didn't exist. And so I think that is something worth fighting for. The fact that you might not be able to change the whole society, but there are wins in terms of preserving human dignity and just maintaining order and that is something that I look forward to being part of, and a motivation that
I think among the people who have ever made me really reevaluate my life choices has always been Braxton, because in our conversations, our career paths are very similar.
Yeah.
Because if you know me, you know that I'm an activist, and I fight towards the end of FGM. As a result, I've always been against a bully, and I hate oppressors. And
tell me about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I also struggled with is feeling like there was no true justice for people who have experienced such traumatic things like FGM.
Yeah.
But through the law, at least we can curb things like put these doctors behind bars or make it illegal. Like, it really helps a society. The smallest steps. Anyway, Brax, moving on to the meat of this episode. So Paxton and I always talk about the biases in our judicial system. And like you've said, Kenya has one of the most progressive constitutions.
Yeah.
Like, every time I read small articles, like, I've not read the entirety, but I'm just like, I know. Like, so much is so well thought out. And of course, with that being said, also there's so much that could be overlooked, and we find those things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always used to ask Paxton is about child court. I remember when I did an episode on, I don't know if it's called what is it called?
Children's law.
Children's law.
Yeah.
Right? When I was doing an episode on men's rights during Men's Mental Health Month, one of the things that I found was men really complaining about how they feel like there's a huge bias in children's law, that they are either seen immediately as unfit just because they're male to raise children, or there's definitely a stronger allegiance to the woman than it is for the man. Do you think that still happens? And if it does still happen, is there a lack of representation of men? Which I feel like that's impossible.
Yeah. Considering the number of male activists nowadays.
Yeah, and even beyond that, the men in the judiciary.
Yeah.
Ni wengi.
Yeah.
So does that bias exist in Kenya, or did it used to exist and has it been settled? Saizi, if I go to court with a man, kuna difference.
Yeah, of course. I think there's been a significant change. And one of the things that our current constitution, the 2010 one, really helped curb or rather reshape, is family law and children matters. Yeah. In that now, of course, Kitambo, there was that bias because, again, the previous constitution and previous laws were really centered around traditional African values, values as that we held as Africans, yeah, as Kenyans. And of course, one of the things that we held deeply as Africans was the fact that women were known to be,
The primary
or rather
caregivers.
believed to be, yeah, primary caregivers, yeah. And so of course going to court na unasema unataka mtoto as a man,
Watu
tunakuangalia
wanakuangalia.
zile za wewe na unakunywa busaa every day
Okay.
after work. You cannot.
You can, hata unajua hata mtoto wako anaitwa
Hata
nani?
kuchange, I know hata date of birth
Ajuangi. I remember our Pastor Bosire talking about how his name was never even Benson. His name was Isaac. He's being taken to school and his dad is asked what is his name. Akasema Bosire Osoro. Akasema no, lazima akuwe na an English name. Akasema Benson. And just like that, his name changed to Benson because his dad didn't know his name was Isaac.
Yeah.
So unaona jina.
I know, wengine hata kwa hospitali unauliza mtoto alizaliwa mwaka gani, ako tu hii.
Alizaliwa lini?
Wacha nipigie mama.
Yeah, I know. You know, there's those things that fathers do. Then hata babangu alikuwa ananizanga every year, uko class, lakini kuna vitu babangu hawezi kosa kujua. Siku ya sports day, he's there.
Of course.
My dad always knew our medical records and things like that. Lakini ati sijui your age, sijui uko class.
No man.
Birthday.
Hata yake hajui.
Hajui. Namwambia, by the way, your child was born today. Anasema, wow, mommy.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's
and
funny.
Then of course the other norm was men are providers, and so most of the time they are not at home. And so you'd understand why previously the courts would lean, or rather the law would lean towards, you know, giving custody to their moms. I mean the women, right? But of course now with the new constitution, which led to, you know, the amendment of the old Children's Act, because we had a previous Children's Act here, was it 201? And then and then sasa kuna the new one, right, the amended one. And of course it was amended with regard to the constitutional principles. And saizi things have changed. Ukienda kotini saizi and you want custody, it's
like a conversation that could happen.
The decision is given on account of so many factors. And of course nowadays we've even seen decisions where a mother can be unfit
to raise a child.
Yeah, to take care of a child. Oof. Yeah. But of course there's EO leeway, children of tender years. Yeah. And so which is so in Kenya it's below 8 years old. Okay. Children below 8 years old wanasema wacha akae na mama, you know, unless it can be sufficiently proven the woman is unfit. Mlevi wenu anakoroga busa kwanza. Yeah, na anakunya yote.
Anakunya na mtoto kwa mtaro.
Exactly. And so under such circumstances, if it's proven, then a father can get custody. And of course we can dive deeper because there are several types of custody. Kuna joint custody, of course, which is something you can, as a guest, right, joint shared between the two parents. And then kuna sole custody where
just one parent.
Yeah, unapewa custody. In other scenarios mpaka the other party anaambiwa you can't see the kid. Especially if, say, if it's a father, if they have a like a past criminal record. Yeah, ama they are just very sketchy to be around the kids. Some of they were ever charged with like sexual offenses. Yeah. So based on like the constitutional principle, best interest of a child, then
they're not fit.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that, you know, the new constitution really helped develop is the fact that kitambo, whenever like the courts were deciding children matters, ilikuwa based on what do the parents want. Yeah, but now they based on the best interest of a child. What will serve best for the child, and so that is decided.
Yeah, that has shifted the
and even for one thing you've raised, Neo, you know, sometimes men feeling like the law was quite biased in terms of maybe getting custody, and even at times mambo ya, what is it called?
They feel like they're being exploited for child support.
Yeah, for child support. Yeah, in terms of like hizo shared responsibility. Juu kitambo ilikuwa either 50-50 ama juu a woman is naturally assumed to, you know, yeah, nakanga nyumbani. Yet kuna wengine wakomboka, right? And so, yeah, of course, right now such scenarios or other circumstances are taken into account.
So right now, what is the process of establishing child support? Like, is there a system you could look into? This is the amount of money he makes. Like, is it like a discussion? Ama tu kuna cut price? Hakuna cut price?
No. So one thing about the law is every case is decided on a case to, like every case is ruled on a case to case basis. Yeah.
Period.
Sometimes two couples, two people wanakuja court, alafu of course we have to evaluate your income. Tunaona yenyewe huyu mbaba unataka kumwambia alete
Aishi kwa bedsitter
50% of his income na jamaa ana earn 30k. Unaona iwezi.
Unataka aishi wapi? Unataka afanye nini?
Yeah. And so under the new Children's Act, there's something like parental responsibility. Yeah. One, it is imposed on both parents. Saizi kwanza uwezi ruka ball.
So tumesema Peteros na Bryos wakamimba
na Jontes
mumeshikwa.
Saizi by virtue of wewe ni baba ya huyu, wewe ndio ulitoa mbegu. Parental responsibility
imposed immediately.
Ushakuwa imposed on. Okay. Because again, remember tumesema tunaangalia the best interest of the child, right? And so always ruka ball. And then even on top of that, this when it comes down to the two parents, then they have equal rights over the child when it comes to like making important decisions for the child. So medical like healthcare, school visitations, hizi vitu zote, then you have equal rights. Hakuna mtu mwenye ako na the upper hand over the other parent. And even in terms of sasa financial support for the child and any other support, there's an agreement. You have to, the court kwanza iwe ina make sure that you draw an agreement that's fair. Right? And so at that point we evaluate the incomes for both parties. Unaona, of course you have to be reasonable in terms of how much is imposed on this
and
guy.
How many children you have.
And maybe you even have a family elsewhere. Because most of the time, remember, the parents don't really have to be together. Most of the time they're separated, they're divorced. Huyu ako na familia yake huku, huyu ako na familia yake huku.
Lakini bado watoto ni wako.
Exactly. And so you still have to take care of the child, but you also have to be reasonable in order to strike that balance to avoid exploiting men.
Let's go back to hapo penye umesema story that the moment a child is born, parental responsibility is imposed, right? And it brings up the conversation. I think we once talked about this. It brings up the conversation about abortion, right? We know that abortion is illegal in Kenya. If a man doesn't want a child, mimi na wewe, me and this man, let's say our cameraman pale nyuma, mimi na cameraman, we have a child together. We get a child. And before, when the child is still in my womb, I decide I want to keep the child, and he says he doesn't want to keep the child. And if we go to court, he has no say, because I am housing this child in my body. Hiyo si business yake. But the moment the child is born, it immediately becomes his business. How do we handle that? Isn't there like a bias there? Ama anafaa kunini? A strap to?
Jeez. I think when you look at it that way, then of course you can see the bias, because I mean, if it's about being entitled, or rather not even being entitled, but having a say, then I produce the sperm, and yes, you produce the womb which harbors the kid, right? And so if I were to be asked, I think the man should have a say at that point. But of course, there's a lot of complexity in terms of that, because again, our constitution provides for reproductive health for women, reproductive rights for women, right? And part of their reproductive rights, in fact, one of the things women fought for over the years was to have rule over their bodies, because my body, my choice, and so let me do whatever I want to do with it. And of course, we cannot permit abortion, but we can like imposing, like letting the father have a say at that point. Then most courts,
because what is coming forward is I don't have a say moving from here. Once a child is born, sina option but kukua mzazi. By the time that I have an option ya kuwa mzazi, I don't have a say.
Exactly. But even that, I don't think it has any bearing, because like we've said, abortion is illegal, right? In that even as a woman, you can't just get an abortion if you want to, right? Because you're stopped by the law, right? And so it's not really an issue. Of course, our constitution provides that the only circumstances under which abortion can be allowed is when
biological,
like complications, some of the woman's life is in danger, and so at that point you can get an abortion. But yet you take it to kukua na ball, and then you want to get an abortion.
So I think that brings me back to the question about fathers, because I think I empathize with fathers.
Me too, man.
I
Me
empathize with
too.
fathers a
Yeah.
little bit. So, in a situation where is it illegal to weaponize children? Like if I again, mimi na kameramani amenipatia watoto, and then kameramani amekuwa kinikosea back and forth, and the only way for me to get back at him is weaponizing him to the children by making the children think he's a monster.
Okay.
As a result, the children don't, because this is a common phenomenon, the children don't want anything to do with their father, even to. Actually, did watch series flooding nature Unchosen about cults, and in a part of cults is that they weaponize the children against the person they're excommunicating. So once we excommunicate you from our fellowship, we tell the children that you are demonic, that if they allow you to touch them, yeah, it's like a whole thing. And the mother is very responsible in demonizing the parent. What is being the other parent? Like lawfully, can the man take this to court?
I think that's actually a valid ground, to go to court, because again, if you look at the new, like the amended Children's Act, right? I think the sections, section, but I think section 7, inasema that the child has a right to, of course, nationality, name, but the right to know
their
and
parents.
Be cared for by both parents,
right?
To know.
So hakuna kudanganya mtoto wako ati babake
amekufa ama babake ni mbaya. Wacha yeye ajijulie babake ni mbaya. And of course when it comes down to that, then that is a matter that should be determined in court, right? If at all the father is the man you're trying to portray him to be, then let the court decide that. And of course that will be done through witnesses. People will come and say nyewe baba tunamuonanga ni mchawi, anakimbia usiku.
Imagine video,
but
CCTV
but you can't just turn the kids. Of course it happens.
It happens very often.
Yeah, but it's a valid ground for a dad for a father to actually go in court and insert his rights.
And the issue is he might take it to court, but will he be heard? Is there chances of him winning this case?
Nowadays there is.
Okay.
And that's one thing about the evolution of the justice system in Kenya. In that, of course, kitambo, there was that bias where people will just normally sympathize with a woman, right? But of course nowadays tunajua hata sisi women saa zingine, we can be malicious, right? And so that is something that the courts really take into account nowadays, and you can see that through numerous decisions made by courts in terms of hiyo mambo ya 50-50, in terms of like financial support. And even there's a case in ilisema that it is wrong to primarily or rather naturally assume that men can't be caregivers, because of zingine hata witnesses will come to court and find that, or rather testify and say that the man is more responsible than the woman. He's a better father, And so I think for the men, musiogope.
Okay.
Yeah, so
take encouragement. Don't be afraid.
Ikiuma naenda kotini.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because there's always that saying that mwanaume hawezi shinda kesi ya mtoto against the mother of the child. Like it was always known that this is no-go zone.
Yeah.
That's enlightening. I think one of the things that I didn't know prior to becoming your friend is that laws are not rigid. I think nilikuwa nafikirianga once something becomes law, it is imestampia, it is written in stone, it cannot be changed ever. And to see that people in the judicial system are also human beings who take into account the nuances that human beings are and amend things is such an enlightening process. I think the second thing that we've always talked about is the Sexual Offences Act. I think for me primarily, so many voices that influence me to look at the Sexual Offences Act come from X, because in X they give scenarios. I even read it. They give scenarios of things, right? So they talk about something like a man mse wa boda amepata msichana akamshika and he assaults her kwa barabara. Huyo mse anaenda anafungwa on charges of rape, right? Mwingine ni bwana na ako na bibi yake kwa nyumba, si ndio? Wanajaribu kuanza maneno, the wife withdraws consent and he proceeds after she's withdrawn consent, na yeye na huyu wanafungwa the exact same term. Na wana complain you on Reddit like crazy, So do you think that there are biases in the Sexual Offences Act?
So I wouldn't really say that there's a bias in the Sexual Offences Act itself, but I can say there has been bias in interpretation of it.
Okay.
Right? In terms of, like you've said, RCC, we once thought that the law was rigid. Ile unasema the law is clear, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the law is not always clear, and even when it is, human beings can really approach like very restrictive interpretations of it, right? And that's what leads to such unfair, scenarios.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that, or other discussions we usually have in law school. There should be provisions that capture that. There's
Intention.
a person when I may capture, and one of the things, but the sexual offenses is a crime. It's a crime, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that are really looked at when it comes to like criminal law ni one, the act ile yenye tunasema yenyewe ulifanya the act, right?
Hatuwezi kutoa hapo.
Yeah. And then there's the intention behind it. And for sure, when you compare from the scenario you've given me, the intentions are
not the same.
Mmoja ni mtu na bibi yake, and in fact they have conjugal rights, right? And so mwingine
wacha
mambo yako, and of course mambo ya watu wawili yenyewe saa zingine
inakuanga hard.
And so, like I've said, cases are usually determined on a case-to-case basis, and so I think the reasonable thing to do for courts is, or rather what we expect from them is, you should evaluate this case. Unaona yenyewe ni mtu na bibi yake, and at the same time, based on like recent statistics we've seen over time, a lot of sexual violence actually occurs between married couples. And so there's that. And that's why I'm saying you can't just establish like one law unasema sasa hii ndo tunatumia to interpret, and that's the practice right now, And of course you're going to venture into another segment ya minors and stuff, and you're going to
hata ni vizuri umenipatia opening. Let me give you a scenario, and I want you to play defense lawyer.
Okay.
So I'm a man. Okay. We've got Friday night, nikasema ni sherehe na nitakia singira. I'm outside. I'm outside. Nimeenda kuwatch game ya Arsenal na PSG. On a Sunday evening, or let's say a Friday evening, right? I've gone, I'm in the club, kuna TV pale, I'm drinking, it's chill, right? Arsenal waka lose. Msichana mrembo akaanza kuniongelesha. Akaanza kuniambia, baba, sorry.
Don't worry now.
Baba,
just like this.
Do just like this. Come down. I can even calm you down in an Airbnb. I can help you calm down.
What can you do?
Come to Sai. Yeah? Yeah, I said. Yeah, msichana mrembo, what is the problem? Wakati your time. They leave, they go. The next day, polisi wanamkujia. Wanaambia kijana manga umenunulia mtoto changa.
Wanavunja hiyo mlango kwanza.
Direct. Akaambia come tukusindi somewhere. Tunakuongelesha tu pole. But the police take him in, and he's hit with a case of defilement. Anaambiwa, this minor that you were with yesterday at the club ukampeleka kwa BNB ni mtoto. Now you are hit with a defilement charge. So 2 scenarios, and I want to tell me if there are viable defenses. Okay. Number 1, I was intoxicated. Does that stand for anything? Mimi ni zangu zili nice. Na si zangu zili nice kabisa. And the second one, I trusted this institution. A club is supposed to be a place that keeps minors out. They're supposed to do their due diligence to make sure that everybody who is here is an adult. Whatever we're engaging in is adult behavior. Therefore, makosa si yangu yoona. Sina noma. Mimi nimekuwa tu with my charismatic self. Msanii alipwe. I was just chilling, watching my Arsenal. Then this girl talked to me. How would I have known? Was I supposed to ask her for an ID when I'm assuming kwa mlango alishauliziwa ID? Ama bado nafungua niambie. See my fate.
Sasa, of course, I come bearing good news. That is under the new, or rather under the Sexual Offences Act, right? Then that is one of the considerations that was made, especially when it comes to defilement, right? That there's a provision in inasema that if a minor, portrayed herself in a manner that would suggest that they're an adult, then
kama kwa vilabu.
What
are you doing here?
Exactly. then that is an exception to the rule. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the punishments that are
So
given for
utaachiliwa huru.
defilement case. Unaachiliwa, but of course it depends with the defense that you have.
Okay.
And of course venye tumesema pia on a case to case basis, ile ya kuna saa zingine enyewe yako club, yes, but hata wewe uwezi angalia uone huyu ni
anakwambia my favorite color. What is your favorite? Anakuuliza your favorite color?
What
is your hobby? Wewe karada.
One thing I would suggest or rather recommend to men is that ukikuwa in a situation like that where you can't really tell whether this person is an adult, because again saizi tukiangalia 16 years ama our two the children in JSS, hey,
anakuambia tia lazima umuulize tu maswali.
I know.
Kwambia anafanya nursing poly karada.
Unamwambia ama anakuambia ati ako university, tunaambia uko university gani, anasema ako UoN, na unaishi wapi, anakuambia Eldoret. Ndio kwa kila siku karada. Una commute kila siku mpaka
UoN, na anafanya course gani?
And so I think it's usually a very tricky situation because most of the time unapata yenyewe as a guy unaenda tu ndani because one, that provision is strictly interpreted ile ya no, they are a minor, and so there are such scenarios, but under the new or rather under the Sexual Offences Act kuna provision ya there can be an exemption
of presentation,
right? Of presentation ile ya wewe venye ulijiportray when you're in a club. In fact, there's another Kisumu case where, and this one was actually a woman, so a woman alikuwa club, and then akiwa club akapatana na a guy akona dreadi, akona miraa, akona cigarettes, like
akasema come
so they engaged in their activities, and then the next time the woman anakuwa anapelekwa kotini. Exactly. And so in that case it was decided hapana, kwanza umse akona dreadlocks, right? And ordinarily of course kuna wa broadcast wenye tunasema group of schools
wanaenda shule na dread,
but tukiangalia to the common high school system ni kipara. Exactly, right? So this person has dreadlocks. One, on top of it, they're in a club, and then they're heavily on drugs, wakona miraa, cigarettes, and all this stuff, and so to a person or a member of public, one can presume that they're an adult, and so in such cases it would be unfair to actually criminalize this person. And so especially there are exceptions.
So what about situations intoxication, like is intoxication a valid defense?
Hapo kwa intoxication
mbaya wewe sema tu nililewa nikafanya
hapo. In fact, one of the laws ya criminal law ni penal code, right? Which is something saa zingine ukikaa si kila saa tu Netflix, fungua hata ujue what's news going on.
News.
Sikuta hizi kuna Google, know what's up, right?
Soma gazeti kidogo boss.
Exactly, because under the penal code intoxication is not a defense. And so there are two types of intoxication, right? Under the penal code. Kuna voluntary intoxication na kuna involuntary. Kama wewe mwenyewe ulijibaia bia na ukakunywa na ukalewa, ukaongeza 2, 3 na ukalewa,
na ukalipa bill.
Alafu you defile someone ama you raped someone.
Remember, ingia hapa utapata pombe.
Hapo unaenda tu ndani.
Pita hivi.
And so that is barely a defense. Of course it comes in handy when proving the intent, but inakwanga in other cases kama mada utasema yenyewe
nilikuwa my
alilewa sana, and so it won't really erase the charges or rather discharge the charges that you've been charged with, but it might cause some leniency yenyewe alikuwa amelewa. But when it comes to defilement, ile unasema ati I didn't know because I was drunk. Unakuta nani alikubaia pombe sweetheart?
Ulijibaia? Ingia hapa watakusaidia.
And so for the boys, unfortunately, that
intoxication is not
a defense.
Okay.
Alright.
Noma. What else was I thinking about when it comes to sexual offenses? About the sentencing. So is there a way that we determine sentencing, like the same charge? This is the case is murder, okay? Same charge, sisi wote tumekuwa murder, mtu amemada mwingine, but huyu anapewa less ama tu, as long as ni murder, sentence ni moja, life. As long as ni defilement, this age gap, age group sentence ni moja. Regardless of the intention or kama a rape case, regardless of the circumstance, mnafungwa to the same. Ni hivyo?
Si hivyo.
Case to case.
Of course kuna minimum sentence zile yenye wanasema for a murder isipite hapo. Huwezi funga mtu alimada unamfunga 1 year ama 6 months, haiwezi. So there's a minimum, right? But again, of course they haven't pressed ni minimum so to life, right? So life is the maximum sentence you can get.
So unachezea hapo.
So unachezea hapo. Unaona yenyewe huyu alikuwa na kisu na akasema wewe baadaye nikikushika nitakuua, na yenyewe akaenda akauyo msee. So hapo funga mtu, right? And then kuna ile ya tulikuwa tu tunacheza nikamchapa hivi kibari, jamaa akaanguka akakufa. And of course so kuna manslaughter, yeah, right? You know that. And so manslaughter is a whole different thing, but when it comes to sasa you've been proved to have murdered someone, proven to have murdered someone, then it depends. Right, as we say in law, it depends.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
That's enlightening to know.
Like, when it comes to like defilement, I think that's one thing in that case I was telling you about that I stumbled upon on the internet recently, was talking about Ilea. One, these are 2 minors. They've been engaging. They were in a relationship, actually, a sexual relationship, right? And kwanza wanasema huyu ni boyfriend yangu, huyu ni girlfriend yangu. And of course, we know that the defilement penalties ni 16 to 17 years. I think inakuanga 10 ama ni 15 years, right? And so kuna difference between someone who actually anajua ni mtoto na mwananga kila siku amevaa uniform akitoka shule and I defile her, and then there's not where we are boyfriend and girlfriend. Sisi wote we consented to, you know, sex. And so is it really fair to punish this minor the same way you would punish an adult, right? And so these are the things that have been in debates, in discussions over time. And of course, with this new judgment, we can see, you know, it's a shift towards the usual practice.
That's interesting. I think the takeaway for this episode is, number one, the laws are not rigid. Like, so much is amended, so much evolved, so much changes. The changes really encompass so much. Like with children's law, that was monumental for me when you told me about it. And also that the people in judiciary are human beings and they understand. Watakusikiza waseme haki tunaelewa, lakini baba, lakini hapo itakuwa ngumu, itakuwa ngori. Sub 2 time tutaongea after.
I know.
Chukua tu ikawa 35. Sasa ni mzuri. Ule wengine wanaingia live. Chukua tu hii. Uko ndani unaweza kufanya mabizo something. Achana na hiyo pombe. Next time come by, you know. I think it's very also encouraging to know that these people are humans. So I think lastly, before we close the episode, has there been a case that you've ever read or like encountered that you felt like this one will stay in my mind for like, you know, live rent free in my brain?
Of course tena kuna mingi. Kuna moja I'm really tempted to say, but it won't really help in this discussion. It's just a crazy one, right? But I think one of the cases I first read in first year when I was, you know, in law school was a case inaitwa Republic, of course, versus Machincharo, right? And of course, you know, one of the cases it really shaped the sexual offenses arena, right? And in this case ilikuwa an adult, when umesema alikuwa, I think alikuwa in a relationship with a 13-year-old and he didn't know, because the 13-year-old one angetoka all the way from her home na giza, na ukiangalia the way like the evidence angetembea 14 kilometers. 14 kilometers is a lot. Nika
kutoka alikuwa dedicated
exactly
for her man.
Anatembea all the way, anaenda kuona the guy, and it didn't happen. It hadn't happened like once. It was a frequent thing, right? And so they were
take ile lyrics ya Kubali. Ilikuwa toka Thika hadi Kwea. Kukupea.
Exactly.
Alikuwa anatembea 14K.
And so of course one time the parents I think learned about their affair, or rather their relationship, and ni adult, the kid alikuwa 13.
13 years mimi nilikuwa nafanya nini?
Mimi nilikuwa
lip
nazungusha
gloss ya
mfara.
grape na hivi
I know, go to exactly.
kunaengwa kiuno kwa
Yeah.
compound.
And so unfortunately the guy akashikwa during the trial sasa. The guy akashikwa and he was convicted but he appealed. And of course his grounds was mi sikujua, you know, na kama ni due diligence, of course this is a person who we've been in a relationship. Nimekuwa nikimuuliza maswali, you know.
Na najibu tu.
Exactly. And so in this court of appeal, was it court of appeal or high court decision? Court of appeal decision, right? No, Justice Chitembe akasema that actually alimwachilia. Na akasema that it's unfair or rather unconstitutional to criminalize a person, yet the minor portrayed herself in a manner that would imply that they're an adult.
They're grown.
Yeah. And so hata me I used to think the sheria ikishasema ni hivi weenda ndani, but that case was so eye opening because I was just like
ako tu wewe unajua which minor anatembeanga usiku
14 kilometers, not once, not twice. Yeah.
Na nakama nakwambia sina kamtu sasa hivi kwa
exactly. And I think
kamtu right now.
Yeah. And at that point I also started like sympathizing with Bushal. Nikona yenyewe some of them really go down for, you know, circumstances they couldn't have. Yeah, they couldn't have preempted. Wanajua tu udem ni mine, like ni an adult because unakuja kwangu, you know, unadanganya uko campus, hata the friends you're hanging out with, you know. And that was quite an interesting case.
No, I was having a conversation with my brother. My brother was in a relationship with a girl. At the time they were both minors, but the next year he was turning 18 and she was still 16. She was turning 17. And I told him itabidi mu break up.
Yeah.
Itabidi mu break up.
Yeah.
Akaniambia but amekuwa demu yangu for years. Nikasema wa
makosa.
Toka hapo.
I know.
So he was so confused about how if I can only establish that this has been my girlfriend for years, it doesn't matter. Nikamwambia acha nikwambie love hainanga dawa pale. Hainanga nini.
Hakuna mtu anataka kujua
ati mko in love.
And then of course most of the time ni parents unja ni mama anakuja anasema shika huyo kijana.
Unapata mama yake alikuwa invite for dinner.
Exactly.
Mothers, let's reevaluate our choices.
Yeah. And I think that's what we were talking about. If such a scenario is presented before you, then you should be able to tell enyewe surely.
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't
malice.
At forceful, you know, like I forcefully, you know,
took advantage of this child. All right. Thank you so much for coming. We might have more questions and you might have to come back.
It's all right.
Yeah, we're very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I think it has been so enlightening for me over the years about how our judicial system works. And really appreciating, like you said at the beginning, how progressive our constitution is and how much it goes to length to cover and protect us.
Yeah.
That being said, continue sana for sticking to the end. Make sure to leave a like, comment, tell us what you think about the episode. If you want other things for us to talk about, feel free to let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day. See you next time. Bye.